Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Nassourdine Imavov versus Caio Borralho fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. Oh, and feel free to join the Patreon as well, the link will be in the description. As always, you can request any kind of combat sporting related content, plenty of videos that have come as a result of it already, and I really appreciate all the members that I've had so far from it. And like I say, link will be in the description. Thank you very much. But yeah, let's get straight into this one. This is a fight in which I'm excited for. It's a fight in which I've been, looking at the UFC calendar and kind of waiting for this fight to happen. It's been quite a while in the making, really. I mean, Imavov has been on his rise, Borralho's been on his rise, and now it's a perfect kind of number one contenders matchup, and that's what it has to be. You know, there's a few people which I've heard about in the MMA community who have been trying to kind of rush along Rainier Derrida to get himself into the position to fight Khamzat Chimaev, because not many people believe that these kind of contenders coming up can really go out there and truly challenge Chimaev. But in my opinion, both of these guys have that opportunity and have deserve an opportunity to do that if they get through this fight. And I think both of them are more than able to challenge Chimaev in their own right. And like I say, they both come with their own threats and their own abilities, which I'll talk about in a minute. But like I say, this has to be, in my opinion, the clear number one contenders matchup. They're going to probably have to force the winner of RDR versus Hernandez to wait. I'm quite glad that they have made that matchup to, shut down any kind of talks about RDR fighting Chimaev. But yeah, like I say, the winner of that fight will probably have to wait for, hopefully, the winner of Chimaev versus Imavov versus Borralho. The division is, of course, so stacked at the moment. There's plenty of good names in there, and realistically, all the fans are just wanting to see an active champion in Khamzat Chimaev. Of course, Chimaev has had plenty of issues with, making fights and things like that before becoming champion, but now with the resume in which is amongst the middleweight division, he really needs to be as active as possible, because there is that queue of fighters there ready waiting now, and this is going to be the start of the queue, so it will definitely be interesting to see if the winner of this, perhaps if things move along well, they could be the winner of this against Chimaev come November, December time. It wouldn't surprise me if that happens. It would be good if that was to happen. To speak about the kind of trajectories in which both fighters have been on, of course, for Imavov, he had his clear breakout moment last time out when he beat Adesanya via knockout, and he is the guy who's getting the main focus and the pressure on him in this fight due to, of course, it being in France. That is an expectation upon him to deliver in front of his home crowd, and the UFC do seem to enjoy going to France, and with the likes of Cyril Gane not fighting in France this time. Of course, he's having a big fight with Aspinall soon, and then other guys like Benoit Saint Denis, who's kind of who is on the card but has dropped off a little bit in more recent times. There is a need for a clear French star, in my opinion. And Imavov, like I say, is getting this opportunity to be that, to headline, like I say, in France. Like I say, he's gained that sudden kind of amount of recognition, of course, after beating Adesanya. I don't feel like many people really knew about him too much before the fight, even though he has beaten other top contenders. I mean, the top contenders in which he has beaten are, relatively big names. I mean, they're names like Arnold Allen, the names like Jared Cannonier, like Roman Dolidze, and even Joaquin Buckley as well. All names which are, noticeable to, the UFC fans as clear ranked guys. And the fact that Imavov's been able to kind of go under the radar and pick up wins against all of them guys is kind of impressive. And like I say, last time out he was able to go out there and pick up a big win. For Imavov, he's been around for quite a while in the UFC. Like I say, fighting at a high level. He's also, I believe, fought Sean Strickland as well to a loss. And so, like I say, he has been in and amongst it. But now, for the first time in his career, he's finally getting the attention, which I feel like he does deserve. For Borralho, though, he's kind of had that kind of buzz around him and that attention around him throughout the entirety of his UFC career. I believe he came through the Contender series and then has been, had his kind of lead and rise to the top. It's been faster than that of Imavov's, and he's only realistically beaten one top contender in Cannonier, and that was last time out by unanimous decision, and that was over a year ago now. So, like I say, he's been kind of, on ice a little bit in more recent times. I think he had an injury of some sort, but like I say, he's been kind of sat around waiting, and the division has changed a lot in that year. But like I say, he's now still got that hype behind him and that bit more recognition as a name compared to that of Imavov, in my opinion. And that is, quite a bit due to the fact that he is kind of leading the way for the fighting nerds at the moment. And it is interesting to see, there's been very few times in which, a fighter hasn't kind of fought in Borralho, but has still had his, name floating around, and his stock has probably still grown a bit, even though he hasn't fought, just due to the fact that the fighting nerds are on such a rise at the moment and are building such a hype. He hasn't really needed to fight this past year because, like I said, the other fighting nerds have been fighting, and that's been still driving traffic towards him, which, like I say, is still very interesting. And maybe he's using his team name to get himself in a good position to be able to get into a number one contender's position whilst only beating one top contender, which in that Cannonier fight it was a pretty close fight at times. I mean, Borralho ended very well and had at Cannonier very much, out and, almost got him fully out of there in that final round, but Cannonier managed to survive him. But before that, there was a few rounds that were very close. Cannonier was having a bit of success. I feel like even, wobbled Borralho a little bit in that fight as well. So again, perhaps showing some vulnerabilities in his chin to an extent. But yeah, like I say, it wasn't as convincing as what Imavov did to Cannonier when they fought. So again, that one win is in which is his, best win against a top contender has already been kind of beaten by Imavov by the fact that Imavov was able to stop him. So again, that's something in which I feel like you have to look at going into this fight. To speak about both fighters a bit more individually, Imavov as a fighter, I think he catches shots well. He was able to do that well against Izzy in the few minutes before he went out there to knock him out in that first, well, I believe it was the second round that he knocked him out, but like I say, in that first round he was catching quite a few of the shots well that Izzy was throwing. He places his shots well, and when he's at a mid-range, he's able to do that really well. And that uppercut in which he landed on Izzy was a beautiful shot, and you could see in the Cannonier fight as well, he was trying to land that shot, and he does. That wasn't just a fluke shot that he landed; it is something that he is trying to line up, but he wasn't able to do that against Cannonier. But like I say, he did it so well against Izzy, and that was a beautiful shot in the first round. I think when he's allowed to have that time to think, he really works well, and I feel like Borralho, going off his last performance might give him that time to think and allow him to, fight at a mid range and fight kind of to dictate the fight at his pace. He is also able to, of course, catch you over the top with power, and of course that was how he was able to, eventually get out Izzy, just with, like I say, catching him, following off the jab, catching over the top, the straight kind of 1-2 with the overhand. It's quite a simple combination, but when it works, it can work really well, and of course it's definitely a shot that will generate a lot of power. He's very good at finishing fights, I believe, and he can catch you when you throw, which is something in which I've seen, which is a bit more of a defensive thing. If you are throwing a kick or something, he's often able to catch it, which can take the sting out of it, can then put you off balance, and then he can respond back with, maybe a shot or two of his own. And again, that's a defensive thing I've seen that he does well. He keeps the pressure on. He was able to do that in, all the fights in which I've seen him in. He's got a pretty consistent jab when he gets it going. It's not as, I think, powerful as that of Borralho's, but he does flick it out nicely. His chin does seem to look a bit better than that of Borralho. I've seen him take a couple of shots. I mean, he took, a couple half-decent power shots to Cannonier, which, of course, like I say, maybe rocked Borralho a little bit, whereas, he also took a couple big shots to an extent from Izzy, and again managed to showcase a good level of a good chin there. So I think his chin is probably a bit better, but again, Borralho hasn't been hurt a tremendous amount yet. I think he finds his timing really well. When he gets his timing down, that's when he's at his best, and that was how he was able to get Cannonier out of there, landing a really nice time shot. And I think he is composed as a fighter. I think both of these fighters are quite composed, in the heat of battle. Negatives about him, I think he can be a bit wild coming in. If he's allowed that time to pick his shots and to be patient, then he will do that. But if he tries to rush in, he can be a bit wild. And when he does that, he'll go for a takedown a bit out of desperation. If he comes in with an attack and it fails, then he will just go for a takedown out of desperation. I think when he's going for these takedowns, he's really, I've not seen a tremendous amount of him being able to keep opponents on the ground. I think he can be kind of turned even if he gets you up against the cage. And in general, I don't feel like he is able to, fight off the cage that well if his back is up against it. He can clinch instead of fighting in close. I think Borralho can be a bit better fighting in close and fighting, you know, physically as well with his clinches. I think Borralho uses them better. I think he doesn't really mix in kicks that much or really go to the body a tremendous amount, and instead of moving off and circling around, which I feel like Borralho does do, instead he just tries to kind of push through it and try and push you back and try and punch through it, which it can of course cause him to have issues with him getting caught whilst doing so. Borralho as a fighter, he's got kind of that fast, smooth kind of aura around him when he's fighting, and it is nice to see, but that does, I think, fade throughout the fight. He's got a good variety in strikes, especially kicks. I've seen the power kind of be carried through all of the kicks in which he throws, as well as a nice knee, which he follows up nicely with. He throws with his left hand up as well. He's able to catch shots because he keeps his left hand quite high, which is again a fundamental which a lot of fighters just don't utilize, especially in the UFC, which is nice to see. He circles off well, like I've said, and when he can work off his jab, he can then factor in a good, 1-2, which was able to cause problems to Cannonier and drop Cannonier with that fast 1-2. In close or at a mid-range, like I say, I feel like he fights well. He'll try and roll with the punches. He has a bit of a Philly shell in which he uses, which I really don't think is the best for him, and I would recommend him probably not use that a tremendous amount, but he does try and roll with the punches, which I suppose does take a bit of the sting out of the shots. He, like I say, follows up nicely with knees or ground and pound. Again, I think he's better on the ground, keeping you on the ground, and he will try and go, for the neck, and is willing to go to the ground maybe a bit more compared to that of Imavov. When he is able to catch and counter, that's when he can land certain good shots, and I think he is a bit more agile than that of Imavov as well. Negatives about him, I think he can lean back when he's throwing, and he can also fight quite often with his chin in the air. He has, of course, the outstretched fingers, which, can be a hazard to the opponent. He did catch kind of near in the eye with that as well. And again, if it is a bit of a hazard, and I also feel like it takes power out of shots if he is doing that. He can be waiting a bit too long to throw, and I don't think he uses his physicality that well. I feel like he could use it a bit better as a physically strong guy. He stands quite tall. His, like I say, chin might be a bit vulnerable. Again, this fight will definitely showcase that, and I don't feel like he always commits to his power shots, maybe waits a little bit too long to do it. When he does really commit to them, they're very nice, but I feel like sometimes he's not doing it enough. His footwork when he's throwing can cause balance issues. I think his, like I say, offensive footwork is a bit poor. Again, not the best Philly shell in which I've seen. He can walk on to quite a lot of shots, and again, like I say, his actual finishing ability on the ground isn't the best. The main kind of top fights in which I've seen of him, especially that kind of near one as well, he got kind of near to the ground and he was in such a vulnerable position, but he wasn't able to actually get him out of there. And again, that shows that perhaps he isn't actually as good of a finisher, in which maybe he could be, like I say, getting his opponent in such a bad position and still not being able to get him out of there. I know Cannonier is tough, but, of course, Imavov was able to get him out of there. Who do I think is going to win? I do think that Nassourdine Imavov is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I could really see him walking Borralho onto a few shots. Then if that happens, Borralho's chin might get tested, and it will be interesting to see how he fares. And, he may even get rocked or even dropped at a certain time. But I feel like with the, the youthfulness still there of Borralho. I think he will be able to battle through it, and if it goes to the ground, then I think he will be able to perhaps have success Borralho and be able to turn him. But I think the majority of the fight will be on the feet, and I think Imavov's timing, accuracy, and the perhaps possibility that he's going to be able to control the pace with it being a bit of a slower paced fight on the feet. I think that Nassourdine Imavov is going to be able to win, like I say, via unanimous decision. Then who he goes on to fight next, of course, hopefully it'll be Chimaev, and no other real guy, like I say, unless Chimaev gets really ill or something like that. But then at that point, they probably would make perhaps an interim title or something like that, something they haven't done in a while. But hopefully that doesn't happen, so it will be Chimaev next. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.